So this past weekend we saw Derrick Lewis score another second round knockout over Curtis Razer Blaydes. Yet again, Lewis came from behind to win. Something seen in most of his victories where he's behind, he'll lose a round significantly. I think in the first round, Lewis was outstruck significant strikes wise 28-3. Denied the takedown in round one. Obviously knew that was coming. Part of the reason why maybe the significant strikes were so heavily favoured towards Curtis. I think Lewis was waiting for the takedown to come, which is a mistake on which is why I think Curtis could have really tried to mix up the striking a bit more. It was so predictable that he was clear for the takedowns, whereas clearly he was having success on the feet. I believe he should have kept it there and maybe waited for late round two, where Lewis was a bit more tired, or progressively maybe into round three, round four, to shoot. Because although Derrick is definitely better on the feet, holds more power, is probably faster, his footwork isn't very good. Curtis's footwork is definitely better. Curtis still holds the power to knock you out, and clearly he was outstriking Lewis because Lewis was so fearful of that takedown. And because it was so predictable, Lewis had the perfect shot in plan. That uppercut was perfectly placed. It was a little confusing to watch because when you watch it, you can't really see what's going on. It doesn't really connect properly, but you just see Curtis stiffen up and fall to the floor like a plank of wood, and Lewis just rains down on him, and then the classic Black Beast celebration comes out. So now begs the question, what's next for Derrick Lewis first off? Well, after the fight he calls out Alistair over him. I'd be interested in that fight, but I feel like that's a backwards progression for Lewis. Lewis beat Volkov, admittedly, came from behind a couple of, I wouldn't say lucky shots, but a couple of big shots when he was clearly down in the fight. I prefer to see that fight to the Overeem fight, since Overeem just lost to Volkov. But the Overeem fight is still a fight I'd like to see. I like watching the Overeem fight. I feel like it'd be an interesting fight versus Lewis. But the issue is, again, Overeem's chin is shown in the Volkov fight not very good anymore. Lewis has arguably the highest punching power in the whole UFC, possibly ever. I can't think of many people with higher knockout power than him in the past. He's obviously now joint for the most knockouts in UFC history of Vitor Belfort. So I don't think it's a bad fight, really, but I feel like Lewis was, I think, ranked 3, just beating Curtis Blaydes, who's maybe ranked 4. So he would, in any ordinary scenario, be in line for the next title shot after Stipe versus Ngannou. But I think he recognises that with John Jones coming up, he is not going to get the next title shot. He could potentially be waiting 2 or 3 fights for the next title shot, in theory, because if Francis does beat Stipe in the upcoming fight for the title, then Stipe can say, well, it's now 1-1. I beat you, you beat me, let's have a third. So a trilogy fight. Same thing happened with DC. If that does happen, then you'd guess that Stipe versus Francis would be booked next. So that's another fight. That's 2 fights now. He'd have to wait for. Whoever wins that would then most likely face John Jones. So that's 3 fights. And the winner of that, let's say it's Jones, because I think it will be by the time this whole thing plays out. He's then got to wait for Jones to come back, and Jones is notorious for not fighting too often. He might only fight once, maybe twice a year if you're lucky. So I think Lewis is doing the right thing by trying to stay busy. I don't think he should wait. I think he should try to stay busy. I just don't know whether Overeem is in. I don't know if Overeem's the correct fight. I feel maybe a fight with Volkov, although dangerous, would be a better fight to determine who should get the next shot. Because who else is up there, really? I think it is, Francis, Jones when he comes up, Stipe's the champ. You got Lewis, Volkov now, and definitely the top contenders. You got Cyril Gane versus Rosenstruik coming up next week. That'd be a good fight. I think if Cyril Gane can win that, he's definitely in with a shout to be in the top, near the top of the rankings. Cyril Gane versus Curtis Blaydes or even versus Derrick Lewis wouldn't be a bad fight. Two powerhouses. I really like Cyril Gane. I think he looks like a good fighter. So yeah, I'm not sure really what's next for Lewis. I don't hate the Overeem fight. For Lewis, I think it's a clever fight. It keeps him busy. I think it's a good fight for Lewis. I think he can win that fight by knockout. As we've seen in the Volkov fight, Overeem does start very slowly, and all it takes, as seen in that Volkov fight, is a couple of big shots to land, and that's what Lewis has. A couple of big shots to land, and Overeem finds it very difficult to recover. And I think if you're going to beat Derrick Lewis, you need to be able to take him down and hold him, which is why I predicted Curtis Blaydes would beat Derrick Lewis. But it even seems that Derrick Lewis can defend takedowns. You know, he jokes around that he's an All-American, but he defended a couple of takedowns. Single leg that Curtis had looked pretty good, but managed to defend it quite well. And then obviously defended the other one with a knockout. So I'm not sure there's many guys at the top of the division that can beat Lewis. Lewis holds a win over Ngannou, which, you know, wasn't a great fight, but he still beat him. Stipe would be interesting because Stipe managed to hold Cormier up against the fence. So I think Derrick Lewis versus Stipe is a bad fight for Derrick Lewis. It's a really bad fight for Derrick Lewis. So I almost think if Lewis does want to win the title, which I'm not even sure if he does, he doesn't really take the whole thing seriously. It doesn't seem like from the outside. And he said it in the past. I think if he does really want the title, I think he's got a hope that Francis can beat Stipe, because I think he has a much better chance against Francis, as we've seen already, than he does against Stipe. Because in that Stipe versus Cormier fight, Stipe found it so easy to hold someone like Daniel Cormier, a wrestler, an All-American wrestler, up against the fence. And if he can do that to Cormier, he'll be able to easily do that to Derrick Lewis. So I think the heavyweight division is very interesting at the moment. It's in a very interesting spot because you've got up and comers like Cyril Gane, you've got Rozenstruik, who is, you know, coming off a loss or two, but still well and truly there. You know, the Overeem fight, the Ngannou fight was unlucky. Ngannou just flung himself at him, and even in the sequence where he did fling himself at Rozenstruik landed 2 or 3 times at Ngannou's head. He landed a shot to the head, a shot to the leg, and I think a shot to the body. And Ngannou just ran through him. So, you know, Rozenstruik did connect, but he just got clipped. That's all it takes for Ngannou. It's all it takes for Derrick Lewis. One shot, and you're done. So, I think Rozenstruik shouldn't be slept on. I think Rozenstruik's still got a very good chance in this division. I think Rozenstruik versus Derrick Lewis, if Rozenstruik can beat Gane, is a good fight. But yeah, I think Cyril Gane, obviously, if he beats Rozenstruik, in a good spot. Derrick Lewis in a great spot now because he holds wins over, I think, 7 out of the top 15. The only one he's lost to currently in top 15 is Junior Dos Santos, who's on a downward spiral. So yeah, it's very interesting at the top. Curtis Blaydes, I mean, there's still loads of options for him. I still believe he can beat he can beat every heavyweight at the moment, other than Stipe Miocic. I still believe that Curtis Blaydes' wrestling is so dominant that although he didn't do well against Lewis because it was so telegraphed and it was so obvious he was trying to do it, I feel like if Blaydes can not telegraph it so much, if he can work on his boxing, work on his kicks, he had a couple of good kicks in that fight. I feel like if he can work on his stand-up game and maybe mix it up more with the wrestling, then he can be dominant in this heavyweight division. He can be absolutely dominant. So yeah, that is my thoughts on the main event of the past weekend, where I think everyone stands. I think Lewis stands in a very good spot. I still think Blaydes stands in a very good spot. I don't think it's really harmed Blaydes too much. He's obviously lost, but to someone like Derrick Lewis, it's not bad. And a fan favourite in Lewis. So there was a lot of eyes on Blaydes this weekend, which isn't often the case because, as he said in the thing, in his press conference, no one really wants to watch Blaydes fight because he's, I wouldn't want to say boring, but he is, you know, everyone comes to see knockouts, and that's not really what Blaydes gives. So yeah, that is my review of Curtis Blaydes versus Lewis, where they stand and what's next for them in this heavyweight division.